Hello and welcome to this series. I'm Tyler Coffin, and throughout these videos we're going to take a look at 4 of Arturia's virtual instruments in the V collection, specifically the Clavinet V, the Stage 73 V, the Whirly V, and finally the Piano V. The common theme of these instruments being that they are Arturia's faithfully modeled virtual recreations of different keyboards, electric pianos, or the acoustic piano. And we'll look at each instrument in detail within this one series, as they do have common aspects between them being along that keyboard theme, but they're also, of course, their own instruments as well. So we'll get to know the overarching concepts, as well as the specifics of handling them within their own individual instrument interfaces, plus the quirks, backgrounds, and history when applicable. Now, being Arturia virtual instruments, there are similar user interfaces, and we'll go through some of those common aspects shortly, but before we get into it, we'll mention a few things here. These are the standalone versions. Of course, they are running in their own window as their own applications right now, and therefore we would have to set up the audio settings and the MIDI settings to work within them. If you have your MIDI controllers, your audio devices, maybe you want to set up however you want to run your drivers and your audio interface, buffer size, sample rate, all of those sorts of things, which will depend on your system and equipment. But within the standalone versions of these, you'll have your audio and MIDI settings set up here, like your tempo as well for tempo-based parameters, and will work a lot of the time in standalone for this series, but of course these instruments can be run as VST, AU, or AAX plugins in whatever digital audio workstation can accept those types of plugins. For instance, this is FL Studio. I have them running as VSTs in here, and at the moment my MIDI controller is running through FL Studio as opposed to through the standalone instruments. And the audio settings are also set within the DAW for the moment. So as I play the keyboard, I can play any of these instruments since I have them all loaded in. And my MIDI is set up in that way, and I don't have to go in and do the audio MIDI settings as I would in standalone. And we may come over this direction to swap between instruments a little bit more easily, but the overall operation of the instruments is going to be the same outside of that audio MIDI settings basically set up, whether you're running it in standalone or as a plugin in a DAW. And again, we'll look a little bit more in depth into that as we move on, but for now, we have the basic idea here. We could go in and resize the windows if we want to maybe see a little bit more of some of these smaller knobs and things like that, but we'll go through all of that sort of stuff as we dig in, which we are ready to do in the next video, so I will see you then.